Okay, I think we are mostly set. Thank you for the help and the logistics here. So the way we will run it is that each participant of the round table will briefly introduce himself if it was not done before, and then we'll explain quickly in 1 or 2 minutes his challenge to deploy IPv6 in their network or in their customer. Then after, we kind of synchronized each other yesterday. We selected about 6, 7 big topics that were mostly common to everyone. And for each of those topics, one of us will stand and explain the real issue, again, in 1 or 2 minutes. Then it will be up to us there on the round table and up to you in the room as well to comment on this topic. And I will try to time them. Okay, so we do not spend half an hour on one topic only, but we get the opportunity to browse through it. So if you want to do a round table, right, you need some participants. First, the round table itself. So then we got it. And we got Ron, which has already been introduced, Todd, which is there, Irena, which is already there, Jacques, you will introduce yourself later, right, during your slot, Jeff, Sylvia, I mean, it was easier, right, the last remaining lady, and then the last remaining gentleman, oh sorry. Okay, shame on me. Yeah.
I know my name is a guy.
Okay, fair enough. Yannick, which is, of course, a lady, right? And the last gentleman is Eddie. He's coming late, right? So now each of them, in this order, will introduce their challenge. So starting with Ron.
I actually went over this list earlier in the earlier panel. So just to remind real quick, our challenges are lack of feature parity, vendors not eating their own dog food, privacy addresses in an enterprise where you really need stable addresses for the reasons I gave, lack of DHCP-v6 client support, lack of network management over v6, although we're almost there, it's getting very close, operational complexity with dual stack, because after you run dual stack a while, you really want to turn off v4, and there's new bugs that we're finding when you turn off v4. And then what we're seeing in major bureaucracies, like the big federal bureaucracies, is a lot of planning effort that goes in with no operational IPv6 experience. Now, I heard an earlier talk say, do your planning, you gotta have a good plan or you will fail. I've seen implementations fail because of too much planning by the wrong people. It's important that they do some things early rather than spend all your time planning. So those are the big ones for us.
Thank you. Next one is Todd.
Okay, so I talked briefly about this before. Transition technologies for us was a challenge, certainly in the, oh, that's a good idea. ISOTAP, Teredo, all of those transition technologies and tunneling technologies that we have been using. I think security is a big challenge for us. First hop security, we heard a lot about RA guard and those kinds of things today. Hardware scale for v6, we have managed to cause some serious outages because of neighbor discovery and ARP rolling a router just because the number of devices behind a layer 3 infrastructure. Tools have always been a challenge. I see that starting to catch up now. It's taken the tooling vendors a long time to realize that they're going to have to support v6. And then operations is always a challenge, particularly when you have a tier 1 and a tier 2 organization that has a high turnover rate. You're constantly having to train and retrain that set of people.
Okay, thank you. Irina.
Yeah, I know it's late, so I'm not going to waste too much of your time. I already also mentioned some of those before. So training and education has always been our biggest challenge. That's why I put it in red, just to, in case, so that you can focus better on that sentence. Yeah, as I said, the engineers always get excited when it comes to new technologies, but that's not the case with the ops people. They fear, they doubt, and so on. Also, about networking vendors, IPv6 support, I think everyone here knows a lot about, and sometimes we kind of became the QA department of some vendors because they sell hardware, and they claim IPv6 is supported, but it turns out that they never actually tested it in a production network. but just in some development labs, which, as you know, it's not comparable with any production environment. Also, we had some headaches with ISPs that claim that they support IPv6, or I may be going to talk about it a little bit later, but yeah, also the lack of DHCPv6 client functionality in some of the major client OS was the main reason that we decided to go with Slack for IP addresses and host assignment. Also, political and organizational, the resource allocation is still very IPv4 centric. This means that if there is IPv4 and IPv6 project, of course, everyone would work on the IPv4 first because it's more critical and so on. And then we also faced an internal so-called chicken and egg problem because our system counterparts, I mean, we are the network team, right? So our system counterparts, they started claiming that the network should support IPv6 first before they start looking into DNS for v6 and DHCPv6 and so on. And I guess everyone has been through that, every enterprise.
Okay, thank you. So next one is Jacques. So introduce yourself, if you don't mind, first.
Yes, okay. I am Jacques Babot. I am working at the European Commission in Brussels, in the General Directorate Information Society. Maybe some of you could be surprised that the European civil servant is in this kind of panel. But you have to know that the European Commission has been interested by the deployment of IPv6 since about 15 years. Why? It's because the European Commission has been always worried about the degradation of Internet. I mean, the slowdown of Internet, which could have an effect on the growth of the economy. Also, on the fact that innovation could be a problem for the innovation if we don't migrate soon enough compared to other countries in the world. And finally, also the risk of market distortion. Just on this slide, you can see that since 15 years, we have done quite a lot in terms of research first. We have invested more than 100 million euros. We have also dissemination activities in mainly funded projects. We had also some policy action. We have elaborate a communication from the Commission to the Member States in the way to inform them about the urgency to move. We have also implemented an action plan about 2 years ago. And finally, we have now an objective, a challenge, is to help the different member states, the administration, to move to IPv6. And to do that, we are funding a project named Gen6, which means to move IPv6 through administration and to give an example of good practice to other organizations around Europe. On our side, we have done also our homework, I will say. Since 2 years, the Europa website of the European Commission is IPv6 enabled. It was doing, not since 3 years, since 1 year, because it was in June last year, when for the IPv6 day. And since this time, our website is IPv6 enabled. We have also a Wi-Fi, IPv6 Wi-Fi access point in our headquarters in Brussels, in the way to allow the visitor to connect. But of course, all of this is not really enough. We like to do more, and this is, in fact, our challenge, to try to have all the administration moving to IPv6 as soon as possible now.
Thank you, Jacques. So, Jeff, introduce yourself.
So, it's a repeat, pretty much, of a lot of things that everybody else has already
Present
said.
yourself.
Sorry?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm Jeff Carroll. You should. That's okay. Anyway, so infrastructure, everybody's kind of talked about the products that go along in there. That's kind of easy. The server and client operating systems, we have a lot of legacy stuff, and that taking of the inventory to figure out what's there, what really supports, and making sure that all those different teams are involved. And sometimes it's not always easy to bring people together to kind of go through all of that. The applications kind of follow after that. It's like, well, everybody says, well, if my server supports it and can do IPv6, then everything's fine. No, that's not always the case, right? We have found that doesn't always work with applications, and then especially utilities. The homegrown, the built it here. We designed it, we built it, it does exactly what we need. And oops, maybe it doesn't actually support that protocol stack operation. So those have to be looked at. The network peripherals is my favorite part. IPv6 ready logo stamped on a widget, on a device, does not mean the same thing to every vendor. It means, yes, it can do something with IPv6. Can it be statically configured? Can it be dynamically configured? Can you change the mask? You know, what all about it? I've got a whole lab full of things that, yes, they work on IPv6, but everything's differently. My favorite is the network camera that you can give it an IPv6 address, but you can't change its gateway if you wanted to anything, and you can't change its bit mask. So, okay, it's ready, it works, but you couldn't do some of the things that you might want to do from maybe even a security aspect. So it's looking at all those different peripherals and what might have to change. And then, like everybody has been talking about this afternoon, all the various levels of security, those that are accidental and or malicious, and trying to bring out those things that are the accidents more than the malicious. Everybody kind of gets excited, okay, we can secure it, we don't want anything bad to happen, but it's what about the accidents? And nobody ever takes devices and just plugs them into the corporate network without asking first.
Okay, thank you. Next one is Sylvia. So I got a slide describing you. I guess everyone knows you anyway, but can you introduce yourself, and then the next slide?
Okay, my name is Sylvia Hagen. My company is Sunny Connection, and we're an IT service provider since more than 15 years. I have different areas of expertise, being identity management, network performance analysis, and IPv6 since more than 10 years. And I can say a good sign for the market is that in the last 2 years, probably 80 to 90% of my work has been IPv6 related. So the market is definitely taking off, I would say. I'm also the president of the Swiss IPv6 Council. We had an IPv6 task force some 10 years ago, and then everybody fell asleep around 2004, 2005. So now we're waking up again, and our council is pretty successful. We have very interesting and active members. And as you can see, I'm author of 2 O'Reilly books on the topic of IPv6.
Your change now?
Okay, so I like to I see all these points that people have mentioned, and I'm completely agreeing with them. I want to add some other layer, and that is when I talk to my usually large enterprise customers, the main issue that they have to figure out in the beginning is how they get from a C-level the attention that is needed, because many companies and many people within companies tend to think that IPv6 is just a network issue, and it's not. It's a lot more than that. And so usually it sort of starts bottom up, and while we have said before that bottom up doesn't work in the long term, that's very often how the initiative is started. And now the first step in the consulting must be to sort of take that initiative and find the ways of talking to the C-level people and create this corporate awareness. And so I think that's like one of the key points where many organizations need help, and they have to see that IPv6 introduction is much more than just fixing lack of address space, but as it has also been said before, it opens opportunities to redesign your network, and it also opens opportunities for innovation. Specifically, like we work with companies in the healthcare sector and also in the automotive industry. And if you look at what research is doing in these areas, then you'll see that many things are coming that can only be done with IPv6. And so it's a real business driver for these companies to understand what IPv6 is all about.
Okay, thank you. Yannick.
Thank you. So I don't need to introduce myself because I spoke this morning. So you asked about the 5 pain points when deploying IPv6, and actually what I did is I went to my IT department and I asked them. And so what I have on the screen is actually what they told us is that one of the main point they have is the lack of feature parity between IPv4 and IPv6 implementation. Actually, it is not only feature parity, but it's also a wide range of IPv6 capabilities, and that is an issue, and that is actually leading us to very often having to do, pilots to validate our assumptions. Also, the lack of description of what a product is fully capable of doing and not doing, because that would have helped us in actually making our decision. Network management tools should and needs to have a full visibility of the network. At the end of the day, that visibility needs to be coherent. Same thing for security, so I would apply the same principle from the network management tools to the security tools. I mean, they are getting better. I mean, to be honest with you, some of the complaint that you've up there nowadays, it's much, much better than what we used to have. The lack of ISP support, so just because we do it doesn't mean our ISP can deliver an IPv6 pipe to us. The lack of application and content that are served over IPv6, and the industry is working on this. And the last point, but not least, is training. What does it mean when someone says, I'm an IPv6 expert? How do I know that person has actually operational knowledge of this protocol? So these are my pain points.
Thank you, Yannick. Eddie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Eric. My name is Eddie Raj. I've been in test and measurement for around 15 years. So I'd like to give you a little perspective from a test and measurement company. Our enterprise customers, really don't, what they tell us is we don't really have a killer application for IPv6. So it's about risk. We know we have to evolve, we have to move to IPv6, but how do we ensure that we don't have service disruption where, paying customers are going to go elsewhere, or we're going to have loss of productivity because of campus users can't access their services. So the main challenge is, how do we figure out which equipment to buy? Is it going to interoperate if we have several vendors? When we do firmware upgrades, how are we going to guarantee that things aren't going to break? But once we've selected everything, we've bought the equipment, or we've upgraded what we already have, then it's really about scalability testing. Is NAT64 or dual stack, what is really the scalability? How many customers can I aggregate there? And then beyond scalability, it's just end-to-end quality of experience. You hear it all the time, but it's very hard to measure. And it's important that certain applications get certain priority, QoS, and it's really about how do we empirically assess whether we can go to IPv6 without pretty much breaking the network and the apps.
Okay, thank you.